Hello and welcome. It is a bonus episode of Big Talk with Todd and Noah presented by Xfinity, and we're joined by the one and only Colt McCoy. This is the third time this season we get to do this. Always fun. It's an episode of Ask Me Anything centered around season awards, guys. So before that, we'll set up this weekend's Big Ten championship between Oregon and Penn State. And Colt, since you're the guest of honor here today, we can start with you. It's exciting that we have this first year of the new conference, this first year of the new Big Ten, and you've got one of the new teams that are going to be involved in it. It was a weird finish with Ohio State losing this week and Penn State sneaking in. It'll be their first Big Ten title appearance since 2016. So the first question, who feels the outside noise more heading into this one, the players or the coaches?
I think coaches. I mean, listen, players are going to be geared up, ready to play. You're talking about a Penn State team who lost to Ohio State early in the season, and everywhere all my Penn State buddies were like, fire James Franklin, get him out of here. This can't win the big game. This is crazy, And then you look at this weekend in college football, and Ohio State's more talented than that shouldn't even been a game, and it was right. And you see and so for me, I think. For the coaches, I think James Franklin and his staff are sitting there looking at like, man, we lost to Ohio State, but we played pretty decent all year long. We've had some close games. We snuck out one against Minnesota, but we got a chance to go win this game, be the Big Ten champs, and potentially be the first seed in the college football playoff. I mean, like, I got to think that like this, they feel that,
Yeah, I would say coaches feel it more. I mean, look, players are getting paid. Some guys are getting paid a lot of money, but not as much as head coaches are. Head coaches are, in this game and all these championship games, these guys are getting paid a lot of money. There's a lot of scrutiny. There'll be a lot of second guessing, just like Dan Lanning, got second guessed for those failed fourth down plays last year against Washington that, maybe kept him out of the college football playoff last year. So those guys are under a lot of pressure, a lot of scrutiny, and more so than players. Kids are, I mean, they hear it, they know it, they're aware of it, but I think they're more resilient and stuff bounces off of players a little bit more than it does coaches.
Yeah, and I also think, like, you look at the state of college football, like Texas has a chance to win the SEC championship first year going into the SEC. We've heard about the SEC for years and years and years. Same situation for Oregon. They get a chance to go in there, win the Big Ten first year they're in it. Like, there's a lot of first at play. And so obviously Penn State coaches, I think, feel it, but Dan Lanning for sure too. What an opportunity for Oregon and their football team.
And how about the other two conference championship games? Same deal. SMU has a chance to win the ACC first year in it. Arizona State has a chance to win the Big 12 first year in that conference. So yeah, it's been a bizarre year, and it's going to be a fun weekend coming up.
Year of first all around college football, which has been a lot of fun to watch. Back to the Big Ten championship in particular, TB, who do you feel like the X factor for each team is going to be in this game?
Well, I think that for Penn State, I mean, sometimes you think of an X factor, you think of maybe somebody you wouldn't be expecting, but I'm saying Tyler Warren is the X factor for Penn State because he's a unicorn and he does so many things, and they've got to creatively find ways to attack Oregon's defense with him. And put pressure on Oregon to figure out how they're going to defend him. First, identify where he's at, how they're going to cover him as a receiver, how they're going to deal with him as a shotgun quarterback or a wildcat quarterback. All the different things that the Penn State can present with Tyler Warren, they've got to do. They've got to feature him. He's the best player on their offense, And so if he doesn't touch the ball double-digit times, then I think that's a mistake for Penn State. And as far as Oregon, I would say their X factor, again, it's not a big surprise, but I think Jordan James, I think he's underrated. I think that he is an outstanding running back who plays his best in big ball games. And I think they have to be able to run the football and take some pressure off Dillon Gabriel, because this will be the best pass rushing team that they've faced in Penn State. They've not seen anybody individually like Abdul Carter. And so the more that they can run the football and make that defense sit back a little bit and have to respect the run, the better it'll be for Dillon Gabriel in the pass game.
Colt, what do you think? X factors for both teams in this game?
Yeah, I think Todd nailed it. Tyler Warren's got to get involved. But here's my matchup. I think I think on the Oregon side, it's Dillon Gabriel and his ability to use his legs. They get the ball out quick. Jordan James is a great running back, but Penn State and these Big Ten teams struggle with running quarterbacks at times. And I think if Dillon Gabriel can make some first downs with his feet, some broken plays, some creative plays where he's outside the pocket, like his ability to use his legs in this game is going to be a huge difference. And then on the flip side, it's Abdul Carter. I mean, that guy's a monster. Can he get to Dillon Gabriel? Can he make some impact plays? His motor never stops. That's why I called one game against Penn State. He flew around the football field. He was everywhere, taking on double teams in the run game, getting sacks. Like his presence in this game and that matchup between Dillon Gabriel and his legs and Abdul Carter, can he wreck the game? That, to me, that's going to be the X factors in this Big Ten championship.
I think both you guys are close, but the X factor in this game for both teams is offensive line play. Easily. I mean, Oregon's front has been ridiculous. They just had 10-plus sacks this past week, and then Colt just mentioned, I know Todd mentioned Abdul Carter and the pass rush for Penn State. Whoever protects better, whoever can run block and design a little bit more creatively in this one feels like they give themselves the upper hand. Let's go to the season awards and memorable moments. Let's start with, what was your most memorable game or moment from this season in the Big Ten? Colt, it was your first season with us in the Big Ten. So let's start with you on your most memorable game or moment in year one.
For the games that I called, me personally, how about Iowa beating Nebraska with 5 total first downs? Crazy.
Welcome to the Big Ten.
Yeah. I still can't believe it. I would say the game that you guys called for me was the most fun to watch. The Ohio State-Oregon game up in Oregon. It was just a battle of the Titans, and the whole world was watching. And then that game didn't disappoint, and I go back and just think about that night and the implications that it had, and it really kind of set the tone for the Big Ten, in my opinion. That those were the 2 best teams in the Big Ten going at it, but really, probably at least top 3 or 4 teams in the country, and that to me that was a fun one to be tuned in for.
Yeah, I would say that was my number one most memorable game. It was a thrill to call it. It was, it lived up to the billing all the way down to the very last play. And then the other game, memorable to me was sitting there in the hotel watching Ohio State and Michigan this last weekend and just shaking my head the entire game and saying, how is this happening? I mean, how is Michigan going to beat these guys? And, I was telling Noah, Colt, it almost seemed like to me that Ryan Day was so bent on proving that they were as physical or more physical than Michigan, because they had not been the last few years, that he went away from what they could have done the whole game, because, the front 7 of Michigan's defense is legit. They were injured in the back and playing without their best cover guy in Will Johnson, and they couldn't match up with Ohio State's receivers at all. And yet they kept trying to, I don't know. I just felt like they didn't exploit what they could have exploited. And maybe they weren't confident that Will Howard was going to deliver the ball or make good decisions or whatever, because he didn't play particularly well. But, I mean, we talked about Tyler Warren. How do you not feed the ball to Jeremiah Smith 12 to 15 times a game? I mean, how do you just not get him the football? It makes no sense to me. So, but I could not believe. I just shook my head and watched that game and said, I cannot believe what I'm watching here. And Michigan is going to win their 4th one in a row.
It was unbelievable to me. I couldn't believe it. But then I look across the country, and it's like, how did Texas not blow out Texas A&M? They let them hang around the whole game. How did Oregon, let Washington hang around for most of the game? How did Georgia let Georgia Tech beat them? Like there's so many head scratchers across the country last week, and that's why I think going into this college football playoff season, it's like it's really up for grabs. It can whoever plays the best over these next few weeks and kind of gets hot is good. It could be somebody we don't even talk about, like SMU. Like I don't know. It's just it's a wild football season.
It's going to be more like the basketball.
Yeah, NCAA tournament.
Yeah,
I mean, that's what
who gets hot at the right time, right?
Yeah, that's what it feels like. I mean, Colt, you forgot to mention, like, how did Miami hang in there for so long with Syracuse? It made no sense across the country. I know, insane. Let's go to question 4 for today. How did the new, and we kind of talked about this a little bit, but how did the new Big Ten look in its first year of the conference realignment? What stood out the most in 2024, Todd?
Look, we were excited going all the way back to Big Ten Media Day when these 4 new teams from the West Coast were there for the media day, and there was a new energy, there was a new vibe, there was a new feel. At the end of the day, you had 2 of those 4 teams that finished 6-6, and 1 that finished 5-7, but the other one went undefeated, the only undefeated team in college football, and and is ranked number 1. It was ranked number 1 from week 6 all the way till right now, and is proven to be the best team out there right now anyway. So I think when it was all said and done, you end up with Oregon, Penn State, Indiana, which was one of the great stories in college football this year, and Ohio State, even though a little bit of the luster was knocked off last week when they lost to Michigan, still an outstanding talent team. I mean, those 4 teams, I think the Big Ten, when it was all said and done, was the best conference in college football in terms of strength at the top. I look at the SEC, you got the 2 teams playing, Texas and Georgia, I think are both really good. I think Texas is better. But after that, I mean, I don't know who's really good beyond that, and the same thing with the other conferences. So I think you look at those top 4 teams in the Big Ten when it was all said and done, and shoot, the Big Ten was the best conference out there.
Colt, what'd you think? The new look Big Ten this year.
Yeah, I thought it was fun. I thought the matchups were great. You get these West Coast schools playing these old school Big Ten games, like Oregon almost slipped up against Wisconsin. You get the Oregon-Ohio State matchup. Now we get Oregon-Penn State. I mean, I just think for college football, that's nobody really knew and questioned all these like big superpower conferences coming together. But I think it was a fantastic year for all the fans to see, those matchups and those teams collide. And I certainly enjoyed it.
Yeah. So I think that the next question, we kind of have our obvious answer of coach of the year in the conference, and that would be Curt Cignetti. So if Curt Cignetti was exempt from this category, Colt, and you had to pick another coach of the year outside of what he did at Indiana this year, who else in the Big Ten would you be looking at as potential candidates for that?
Yeah, listen, there's a lot of good teams and a lot of new coaches in the Big Ten that I think are doing a good job, like Michigan State, Washington. Those coaches are going to turn this thing around. They've got great staffs. But I would say Illinois. I would say Brett Bielema. I mean, I'm friends with Brett. He was a coach of mine when I was at the Giants, and he was a guy that just resonated football. He knew both sides. He knew special teams. He was fun to be around. He had this sort of kind of glow about him. Like every day, if it was early in the morning, he was drinking coffee. Loud voice, projected. I've always liked him from that moment. And what he's done at Illinois, after they beat Nebraska, when Nebraska was pretty hot at the time, I kind of started watching them and what they did, and they just played good football. They played good defense. They're efficient on offense. Every game they've been in is pretty close. And having a top 25 ranking, finishing the year pretty strong. I just feel like what he's building at Illinois is kind of old school, and it's kind of like grassroots almost. And man, he's got the Big Ten figured out, right? He played at Iowa. He coached at Wisconsin. Now he's got an opportunity at Illinois. I think he knows the conference, and I think he's a heck of a coach. And they were pretty impressive all year long.
Yeah, I like that. I like that pick, Colt. I would say outside of Curt Cignetti, I would say Dan Lanning, and just because there was a lot of pressure on this team. They knew they were going to be good. Everybody talks about how much money Ohio State put towards their roster and assembling their roster. Oregon put a lot of money towards their roster as well. But I just think for them to go undefeated for only the second time in school history, 2010 was the last time, to maintain that number 1 ranking from the time they beat Ohio State back in week 6 all the way through to finish the year as the only undefeated team in college football. And, unlike Penn State, who really only had one marquee game and no marquee wins, Oregon had a couple. And so I just think that what he did, he always kept that team, to me, growing and improving with a growth mindset and a hungry mindset and a chip on their shoulder. And I don't think they ever lost that, and I think that the perfect thing happened for him, which was they had the close game in Madison, and he could really coach the team hard coming off of that and get them ready for this run now. So I think he's done a really nice job.
Hard to disagree with both of those answers. Let's move to our final question, and that's offensive and defensive players of the year in the conference, both sides of the ball here. Todd, we can start with you. If you just want to let it rip, you can go for it. If you want to give a couple of names, you can go for it. The floor is yours.
Well, look, I loved what Curtis Rourke did at Indiana in his first year coming over from Ohio and leading that team. Had a huge game, in the rivalry game against Purdue this past week. But Tyler Warren, to me, was the most valuable offensive player in the Big Ten. I just think part of it was his uniqueness. Part of it was, the way Andy Kotelnicki featured him and used him. But his ability to do so many things well. I mean, he could run the offense as a quarterback. He could throw the football. He could run the football. And he was an excellent receiver, tight end, and good yard after the catch guy. So, Penn State would not be anywhere near where they are this year without him. And so he's my offense. Defense, I guess maybe because I didn't go with Curtis Rourke, I'll go with Aiden Fisher because I think the Indiana defense played outstanding football this year as well. It wasn't just offense. I think their defensive numbers were really, really good all year. So that's who I would go with on defense.
Colt, you got thoughts, rebuttals?
No,
argument?
I'm with him. I mean, the guys he mentioned, Curtis Rourke, Tyler Warren, those are hard to argue with. I also think, the transfer Dylan Gabriel going to Oregon and doing what he's done and stepped in and filled the shoes of Bo Nix and executed that offense is obviously well done. They're undefeated, but I'm going with Caleb Johnson. I mean, listen what Caleb Johnson is. He's leading the Big Ten in rushing. I got to call a game last week. I mean, they had him bottled up for 40 yards, so they decided to throw him a screen, and he breaks like 18 tackles and changes the whole game. And he played most of the year with a quarterback situation that was in flux the whole year. I mean, they've got a fourth string, backup walk-on quarterback for his last 3 games, and he's dominated. I mean, he's single-handedly won these games on offense for Iowa, and what he has done all year is just nothing short of remarkable. And so that would be my guy on offense. And then for the defensive side, listen, there's a lot of good linebackers in this conference. Jay Higgins played really good for a long time, older guy. Aiden Fisher, but I think the best of them is Carson Swessinger from UCLA. I mean, his story. I mean, he leading the Big Ten and the country in tackles, and he didn't even play the first 3 weeks. That's unbelievable. Like they had Femi Oladejo playing the mic, and they moved him to edge rusher after week 3. Insert Carson Swessinger, and he has like 120-something tackles on the year. I mean, he flies around. He's extremely fun to watch. He gets a lot of one-on-ones because they rush him on running backs, and he's just a disruptor. I know that's a tough pick because UCLA only won 5 games this year, but I don't think they win 3 games if they don't make that switch and Carson plays the way he did. And he I think is a guy who's going to translate to the NFL very well. Smart, physical. And so I think he's very deserving.
Yeah. He might have the second most syllables in his last name of any linebacker in the conference, along with Mateo Uiagalelei. That might be number 1. But great answers, great season, really fun all across the board. Colt, we appreciate you this season for joining us for a couple of these bonus episodes.
Wait, before we sign off though, we should let you, and I know what your answer is going to be, but we said offensive player of the year, defensive player of the year. Who would be the special teams player of the year?
Come on now. That is Atticus Sappington. Easily Atticus Sappington. Yeah. Well, it would say Atticus Sappington or Atticus Bertrams. It was the battle of the Attici, but I'm taking Sappington as my number one decision. No, I will say though, if we actually were deciding, Dominic Zavada with what he did
was pretty awesome. Yeah.
And Jonathan Kim with what he's done at Michigan State would all have to be very much in consideration, because we knew the last couple of years that wasn't even a battle. Tory Taylor had that locked up week 1. So
he was the guy.
I'm glad we've gotten some other names in there as well. Yeah, Reese Dakin has really come along strong, but he's still not quite Tory Taylor. So we'll get there at some point. But Colt, we appreciate you for joining us here in the Big Ten this year.
Yeah, man, it was a blast. Thanks for having me. This was always a highlight of the week. And so, yeah, sad it's over, but excited to see this college football playoff shake out. And I would not be surprised, boys, Penn State beats Oregon.
Ooh.
I won't be surprised either. I won't be surprised either.
I like it. All right, nice little call of the shot. We appreciate everybody for tuning in. Big Talk with Todd and Noah and Colt for this bonus episode. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and download on the NBC Sports YouTube channel, wherever you get your audio podcasts. And we'll talk to you soon.